crypto asset? Which one's the best crypto asset? Bitcoin's the best crypto asset. Which one's the best? 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 What's the second best?
This is Discover Crypto. My name is TJ, and every day on this channel, we show you how to make money with Bitcoin and digital assets. We've got another incredible show lined up for you guys today. We've got Bitcoin potentially pumping to 100K today. Shocking things coming out of the FOMC and China. People's Bank of China is printing money. We've got rate cuts there. Disco ball is spinning extra fast just for Steve-O. We've got Manawak in the house sitting right next to me, visiting him. Lean, wave, put away out here. There he is. Hey, Manawak in the house. And as always, part of the Disco fam, some of our favorite creators and hosts here. I'm going to be joined by Drew from Blockchain Basement and Kelly from BitLab Academy, breaking down what we have to expect. We've got Jerome Powell speaking later today. And just big news of the first ever strategic Bitcoin reserve passed by a state in New Hampshire, the Freedom State. So yeah, it's really good. Everybody's feeling great today. How are you guys feeling?
Dude, it's the nightly video that I'm putting out tonight. I'm so excited for. You know, the top altcoins. I did put out a video. It's coming out on Discover Crypto tonight about how I would take $20,000, what I would put it into to make $200,000. It took a lot of research and a lot of good calls on really seeing what ETH was turning into, knowing that the market isn't dead, having that conviction. The entry points that I was looking at last night for these projects are killer. So definitely check out that. Other than that, man, I wouldn't be surprised if we break $100,000 today. I think the title isn't too hyperbolic. Things are getting crazy. Trade deals are on the edge. And we are literally sitting here at $97,000, $98,000 with all of these new wars breaking out. It's a great time to be.
Yeah, it's exciting. I mean, we saw the news, just a non-stop onslaught of just bullishness yesterday. And remember, there's been a huge sort of compression of the underlying bullishness in especially the Bitcoin market over the last month and a half as things have gone sideways. The S&P 500 took a pretty big spill to the downside while Bitcoin held up relatively well. And we're seeing charts like this from Colin Talks Crypto showing this outline of exactly what a lot of people are expecting here, not just from the global M2, this global liquidity explosion, which we're going to be diving into and talking a little bit more about today, but also what's going on with the trade war talks with China between Scott Bessent and their economy secretary, whoever it is with China. But then beyond that, we're also seeing, as you mentioned, my love, my heart, my blessings goes out to everybody over there in India and Pakistan. Really sad to see that we have these wars bubbling up around. On the other side of that, we're also seeing Bitcoin is holding up relatively well in the face of another international conflict. So We've got a lot to talk about today. And that FOMC meeting, is there going to be a rate cut? I don't think there is, but I think we're going to get some really good tonality coming out of what's his name, Jerome Powell, regarding whether or not they're going to end QT and what the plan is going to be moving forward. Yeah,
it's going to be a crazy day on the charts. And, we are going to cover that live as it happens. Overnight, we did fill the CME gap to the upside on the CME futures chart here. So as you can see, this order that we had above us, and I was thinking it's a larger CME gap. It was more likely to fill first. We did fill that. Now
the question is the 92, right?
Right.
I wish we had gone and filled the 92, and then we could go fill this 97 with confidence.
Oftentimes you get you get a little bit of time before these fill. Like this was the major one right here at about 77 to about 80,000, 81,000. It took some time to fill that gap. This, I wouldn't be surprised if it's just a snap movement down to the downside, or this is the first CME gap to not be filled since literally 2022. So, every single CME gap has been filled since this moment right here. This is, we had a lot left over back here. Up until this point, CME gaps were about 87% hit rate. And since then, since ETFs, they literally have not missed. So that is the big question. I wasn't afraid of talking about longs yesterday, but just keeping a stop loss in case things get wild. But seeing the news break out about yet another war and conflicts, and really this conflict is like, in my opinion, these conflicts are all resource based.
Mhm.
And we're going to dive into really what that means later on in the show here between India and, believe it or not, China involved with this conversation. So
Yeah, I do want to shout out somebody here in chat actually was talking about stacks is pumping. And that's true. And there was a kind of a leading indicator there regarding stacks. Just the other day, we saw, where is that tweet at? Right here. Just the other day, we saw this social dominance, basically the mind share of people out there. And Bitcoin, of course, has the largest social dominance. But interestingly, the next one on that list was stacks, followed shortly thereafter by dog on Bitcoin. So sometimes you can look at various metrics beyond just looking at what's going on in the price action on a chart. You can look at other data metrics that gives you sort of a leading indication, or at least a hint about where some liquidity might be flowing soon.
Right.
Yeah, and I did forget to mention, I'm sure we're going to talk about this. The other big thing that's happening today is the Ethereum upgrade. The Pectra update
Yes.
goes live today. So
Happened this morning, I believe.
yeah, I think so. Yeah.
And the stats behind it, I mean, honestly, there's been a large amount of influence. So when we get to the altcoin section, I mean, Ethereum is actually statistically looking pretty fun. And where we're sitting right now, Kelly, I've been looking at the green dot that printed on the weekly for about 2 weeks now. I've covered this extensively, but what are you seeing on the charts for Bitcoin? I mean, we're going into some chaos. We have the FOMC. I believe it is in about 3 hours from now. There's a 99% chance that we're going to see, or 97% chance we're going to see no rate cut. Are you being cautious about this, kind of trading session going in? Because a lot of people are going to be thinking about taking longs, shorts. Should they schlong it? Should they whip their schlongs out? What do you think?
Well, I mean, I think we've seen over the almost every one of the FOMC meetings, we've seen the run up into price action and then a sell off into a run up. Essentially coming over to my chart, essentially seeing something where the price action essentially goes something like this: you trap the longs, trap the shorts, come back to equilibrium, and then pick the direction. In this case, the dominant direction is going to be to the upside. Why? Because the trend is your friend until the end. And we've seen this massive uptrend. Yes, even with this big pullback that all it did was test a previous range high, this is part of that upper, that very strong bullish trend. And now when we're looking at where we're at right now, especially on this 4-hour chart, it would not shock me to see the price have some little bit of swing around this, but I'm feeling more and more, especially looking at that CME futures, I'm feeling more and more like the strength of the bullishness is going to help keep us up in here. If we do swing to the downside, the target I'd be watching for immediately would be right here at 96.9, basically right about 97 flat on the CME futures. If we do lose that, it's not the end of the world. I'd be watching for a number of reasons for the price action to sort of maintain this level right in here about the 96,000 on the very bullish case. And that's because we have these two moving averages here, the 50 and the 21, as well as this rising level of support, all sort of converging right in here. It starts getting a little more problematic for the immediate term for bulls if we lose that, but it still would be in a very bullish structure to even come down because we still have this CME futures gap down here. But I am leaning very much more on the bullish side. So if we don't get any shockers, and remember, it's like 98 or 99% of the CME Fed Watch tool is suggesting that there's not going to be a rate cut. So that's not going to be a shocker in the market. If you do see a bit of a dip on that actually being announced, I would call that trap mentality because what's going to be most important today is 2:30 p.m. when we get the press conference with Jerome Powell and what his tone is in regards to talking about quantitative tightening and also some other metrics that TJ identified yesterday, and we've all seen as well, about what's going on with the Treasury and the Fed, and some stealth QE coming in, as well as massive printing and liquidity injections that we're seeing in China.
Yeah. And then, we're talking about a bullish market structure, but on top of that, the sentiment and the adoption of Bitcoin is almost overbearing because yesterday, we had New Hampshire moved in. The governor, Kelly Ayotte, officially signed the bill into law in New Hampshire for the state to invest in Bitcoin. And this is up to 5% of their funds as a state can be invested into Bitcoin as of now. Very, very cool to see this. And also, me and Kelly, we were on a show with Bruce Fenton out of New Hampshire a few times over the past few weeks, talking about, the Arizona debacle with Katie Hobbs. And now we see New Hampshire has taken the first striker stance as the first state in the U.S. to actually sign this in. Major catalyst. Now, Kelly, we've seen some worries about Florida, but Texas is still well in the running. Do you have any thoughts? Is Texas going to be the next one to sign this Bitcoin reserve? Or is there going to be more states that are kind of acting like Arizona and their political intent?
Texas seems very likely, but we have to remember Arizona still has, I think, 2 other bills. The first one was vetoed, but I just want to sidetrack here for a moment, because when I saw this post yesterday regarding the New Hampshire signing this into law, I went ahead, I reached out, as we do in a content channel platform, trying to get people. It'd be great to get the governor on here from New Hampshire, and it just friendly invite. And check out this ignorance. I just have to highlight this. This is from Huckberry, which is at IBY Huckleberry. If you want to go and tag this individual, it says it can be argued successfully that the primary utility of Bitcoin and crypto is to hide illegal and criminal transactions. Its second utility is for speculators to bet on the acceptance of perceived, just complete nonsense. And I had to go in there and just completely turn shop on this individual. I don't know where the actual reply is. Did it get hid?
Maybe.
Man, I took it to task there. Oh, here it is. Yeah, I just pointed it out. Don't want to read through this, but basically dropped the facts of actual information there on that. But we're still seeing a huge amount. I just highlight this because we're still seeing a huge amount of ignorance broadly in the crypto ecosystem, in the Bitcoin ecosystem, and especially people that are outside of this. So while it's amazing that we got New Hampshire to sign a Bitcoin reserve into law, this is only, again, one of those bricks in the wall, one of those bricks in the pathway to where we think this is all going in the near future. And you just have to remind yourself, the near future could be over the next few years, but this is going so exponentially. I cannot even begin to guess. But yeah. Texas, I think, is next.
I think Texas will most likely be the next one, and that's obviously a lot more substantial from an economic perspective. A couple things that are interesting, though, just fun facts for you guys to point out about the New Hampshire. One, the Free Thought Project is from New Hampshire, and that is kind of one of the things that brought some of the Bitcoin forefathers together, or at least kind of put Bitcoin on their radar, or way back in the day. I'm talking about Roger Ver, Charlie Shrem, and Eric Voorhees. I don't know. I'm pretty sure Ver and Voorhees were both part of the Free Thought Project, or at least longtime listeners, contributors, whatever you want to call it. And so pretty cool to see that. And then the other thing that I didn't realize, Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. So where the Bretton Woods Agreement started.
Wow.
And where like the beginning of all fiat currencies being born now is the first state to adopt a Bitcoin strategic reserve.
And not only that, first state, New Hampshire, the first state to adopt a strategic Bitcoin reserve, and their state motto fits it perfectly: live free or die. And Bitcoin is all about freedom. It's all about personal financial sovereignty. Whether you're an individual, a corporation, a government, this is going to be that asset outside the system that I think is truly going to reshape what we're seeing, how this world interacts with each other moving forward. It's more than just a money system.
Yeah, the banks, previous to BlackRock coming out with their endorsement, like a lot of these banks were anti-Bitcoin. Now it seems like this unstoppable force that they're having to figure out how to deal with. And now I even saw this $1.7 trillion assets under management, Morgan Stanley, saying that Bitcoin has sufficient market cap to be a U.S. government reserve asset, essentially giving it the blessing to be looked at as a reserve asset for the entirety of the United States. We do have that active bill sponsored by Democrat and Republican. I think it's Loomis, and is the what's the Democrat's last name? Is it Gillibrand? Gillibrand. Yeah. So it's got bipartisan movements on the U.S. Bitcoin Strategic Reserve, but now we're seeing banks highlight this as a feasible movement. Which, if you had told me last cycle that in 2025 the entire U.S. government is going to be thinking about Bitcoin as a U.S. reserve asset, I would have lived in a tent. I would have sold my house and just, live in a tent for a few, because that's where we are right now. We are still early. You had something?
Yeah, just that final line there. It's just magic. It suggests a $370 billion allocation.
Right.
I mean, and then you got people like the Governor Hobbs in Arizona saying it's not a tested asset. Meanwhile, you have some of the largest financial asset managers in history between BlackRock, Fidelity, Morgan Stanley, and the list goes on, all basically just singing not just praises, but singing the truth of Bitcoin as a needed, an imperative asset in a portfolio. Not just, hey, this is an investment opportunity. No, this is going to be something that you're going to wish you participated in when you have to later versus now when you can choose to.
Well, Michael Saylor's kind of putting that wish into people's hearts right now. I mean, he came out, this guy, he just ups himself every single day on the bullish thing that he says about Bitcoin.
I love it. He makes me look bearish, right? makes me not look like a hyper bull saying 220K or all this crazy stuff.
It's
so
incredible, man.
If you guys like bullish energy, if you guys like people talking about $500,000 Bitcoin, $1 million Bitcoin, $200 trillion new financial industry, smash that like button, share it, retweet it. If you're on X, if I don't know, what do you do on Rumble? Shout out to anybody who's watching on Rumble, but can they share or retweet? Is there
you could, there's a like button. I think there is a share link as well.
Share link, yeah. So hey, if you're on Rumble, we love you guys. You know a lot about freedom as well. So shout out to all of you guys. Yeah, what do you got, Drew?
Well, it's just unhinged, man. I mean, let's see if the sound works on this. So let me check here real quick. I'll play this.
Oh, should, but yeah, just checking.
So what do we see? We see an industry that's growing from 2 trillion to 200 trillion. You know, when Bitcoin is a $200 trillion asset, what is it? Okay, well, it's still going to be smaller than equity and real estate and bonds. It's just going to be noticeable. It's the emerging global monetary asset. It is digital gold. It is 10 times better than gold, maybe 100 times better than gold.
It's going to be noticeable, right? This is incredible. Just the overlay: real estate at 1.3 trillion, equities 850 trillion, right? You know, the money market's at 500 trillion. Let's look at what Bitcoin's price would be. Just some fun moon math on this. Let's go here. I got to actually type this in because it's such a high number. Let's see here, $200 trillion. That brings you to let's show this tab, $10 million a coin. So that'd be 103x from where it currently sits if it does hit 200 million.
But Drew, the price is already so high at 97,000. How could it even go higher? There's no way an asset could go that high. How would that be possible?
Well, I mean, if the countries and the central banks keep printing and the flow of information keeps exponentially increasing to the people across the world, that's the problem. Is we're in the time frame where over the last 10 years now, communication has exponentially increased. Now it's available to understand on a very, very quick and concise scale, especially on X, what the central banks are up to, the rates of inflation. And you know, it is, I feel like part of me and Kelly and TJ's job here is to show financial literacy with what's happening on the inflation aspect, to show the reason why I Bitcoin. Because my buying power of my dollar that I'm issued by the government is losing that buying power, and I can't get as much per dollar every single year. It diminishes. So it's not necessarily that Bitcoin is exploding, it's that they continue to print, and there is no top to printing as long as these governments are in control. It's an incredible thing what Saylor's talking about, but the movements that he's made on Wall Street are starting to infect the rest of, you know, the larger markets. We look at equities in the $800 trillion realm. The derivatives markets are in the quadrillions, right? So hopefully we never get to that point where we're, you know, making synthetic derivatives of Bitcoin in the quadrillion dollar realm. Then we can get some real problems. But, you know, this is something TJ brought this story up to me is super, super interesting. Howard Lutnick, the CEO of Cantor Fitzgerald, has 43% just about of the firm's top holdings in MicroStrategy. Absolutely insane. TJ, Cantor Fitzgerald is a big part of the 21 Capital proposed competitor.
They are. I mean, they started it. It's from the Cantor Group. So
right.
There's actually a few things I wanted to say on this. Not just that. I mean, that's a really interesting thing to develop, but it kind of comes back to what you mentioned yesterday when you were talking about it being Bitcoin being a black hole, and it's eventually, you know, what a black hole does is it eventually ends up swallowing up everything. And we've got Ray Dalio here now saying, you know, I want to steer away from debt assets and have some hard money like gold and Bitcoin. And we're seeing that play out over and over and over. And what's crazy is I was reading also last night somebody talking about that, how essentially what's happening with MicroStrategy as it gets more and more, the reason he's throwing these numbers out there that sounds so crazy and it's hard for traditional finance to get their head around is because he understands eventually this will swallow all capital markets,
Right.
because they're learning and they're adapting, and everything, it's almost like gold. It will be the apex asset. Everything, gold's going up like crazy too. Gold's basically outperformed Bitcoin this year, and it's because people are finally like, you know what? We don't want to hold these paper debt that was unreliable. We need to hold something we can count on, because things are getting more. You're basically seeing the unwinding of the financial system we've been running since World War II, basically falling apart in front of our eyes. And all of the smartest capital allocators in the world are readjusting where they store their value. Now, what starts to happen is you get a network effect. And once MicroStrategy, they've got such a huge lead. This is why they were buying and buying and buying so fervently, is because every time we continue to tick up, every time another person starts running a Bitcoin treasury strategy, every time another competitor comes into that space, it makes MicroStrategy stronger. Now, MicroStrategy, let me show you this real quick. And sorry to jump around a little bit. You probably had some of this saved for later in the show, but while we're on the subject, check this out. MicroStrategy has a bigger treasury than Apple.
God.
And it's not going to take much movement in the Bitcoin price before they're number 2 behind Berkshire Hathaway.
Holy cow. And the rest of the market's going to see that, right? And that's that snowball effect.
They're already seeing it. And what's happening is they're going to be issuing debt, and their debt is going to be institutional grade. It's going to be nation state grade. It's going to be rated at a more secure debt offering than governments, than China, than the United States. Like, it's not going to take long. And I think that's what 21 Capital sees too. If they can do it with a product and a revenue and a business, essentially a GDP, right? If they can run a surplus in their business, be producing more money, and have hard assets backing their debt, people would much rather buy MicroStrategy debt or 21 Capital debt than the US government debt, than China debt, than European Union debt. Like, that is happening, and that's the world and the reality that Michael Saylor is living in when he's throwing out all these crazy numbers. This asset is gonna swallow up all the capital. It's inevitable, and it's a matter of if it's 5 years, if it's 10 years, if it's 20 years, it's gonna happen. And they just it's almost a controlled demolition now of all the other debt around the world. Because they're always gonna print money. They always have, they always will. We saw it all last night. China cut rates. They're printing
as long as they have a standing army, they're gonna do it.
Well, beyond that, all these things we're talking about, we throw around different price predictions for Bitcoin, where the price might go, how and why it could get there. And then we look at what's going on with the FOMC meeting today, the argument about the rate cuts. I think this is going to be a laughing matter when we look at this 5 years down the road, and we're wondering what small percentage points the market might move over a day period because of the FOMC. But then I think it's this right here. I did a post on it yesterday. Is anything really priced into Bitcoin? Because it feels more like we're foraying into the exponential unknown. Why? We have over $300 trillion in global debt right now. We see money printing going off the wazoo already around the world. It's likely about to start here in the US as well. We're already seeing some stealth stuff, which you're going to get to those stories in a moment. But China is one of those major players in the global liquidity, and they just injected $1 trillion yuan 3 hours after agreeing to trade talks. So how can we even predict where this is going in terms of the price? There is no cap because there's a fixed total supply of Bitcoin, and the world is just now waking up to it. And what I love about what you said, TJ, is that it's not just Bitcoin as an asset by itself. We have Bitcoin also as the underlying treasury for MicroStrategy, which is the hottest asset in the traditional legacy finance world. So we're hitting it from so many different angles that, it's, as you said, I think it is a black hole for liquidity, which those that are participating the earliest will stand to gain the most. But at the end of the day, everybody is going to be involved with Bitcoin one way or another, I would say, within the next 7 years.
And it's something we have, it's a big day, FOMC, and, they're going to be holding the rates, it looks like, currently. But there is some nuance me, Kelly, and TJ have been talking about for quite some time. That's a big driving factor on why we're going to see, in my opinion, a few rate cuts, not just one or two, but possibly even 3 to 4 rate cuts this year. The Federal Reserve needs to lower these rates because the U.S. needs to roll over $8 to $9 trillion in debt in 2025 this year. Rolling over 8 to 9 trillion at 2025's higher rates that are currently existing versus the 2022 rates, 1 to 2%, because right now we're at 45, increases interest expenses projected at $1.1 trillion for 2024 and rising. This crowds out other spending, and its interest now exceeds military budgets, right? So refinancing that massive amount of debt is simply not an option for the Treasury and for the Federal Reserve. So we're going to see them have to tap out to be able to refinance all of the existing debt at artificially low rates. And then all chaos breaks, because the further we go down this road, the bigger the symptoms become, the bigger the bandages have to become, until Bitcoin essentially swallows this financial sector. Or really it's the system at large, it's not just a sector. So this is something that, when you're trying to make sense of why the Treasury is cutting rates when we know inflation is going to be going up and they're continuing to print, it's because they have to continue kicking the can. That's $10 trillion this year, but $37 trillion in general down the road as long as possible. This is why we need hard assets backing our dollar, like Bitcoin. Honestly, I'd like a balance of Bitcoin and gold backing up the United States.
I mean, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, that's the issue we have when people say the word need. The Federal Reserve, I feel like people really misinterpret the relationship between the United States, or say Trump and Powell.
Mhm.
Powell doesn't work for Trump. The Fed doesn't work for the U.S. government. The Fed is a private bank that has given us a ton of loans, and they're not necessarily our friend. Now, we are very intertwined. You could say we have mutually aligned incentives, because the Fed holds a lot of the U.S. debt, and if the U.S. goes under, the Fed is going to suffer a very similar fate. But at the end of the day, it's just like a bank that has given you a ton of loans, and they're calling those loans due, and you're saying, we need you to renegotiate with us on those loans before you call those loans due. They don't have to do it. And the only reason they might do it is if they think everything else is going to fall apart. And to your point, Drew, that is a very likely scenario. If we have to refinance at these high rates, there is no way it is sustainable through the long term, which is why we're moving towards a different system. But don't get it confused. The Fed is not happy about the United States moving towards a Bitcoin strategic reserve. Central banks in general do not like nations having actual sovereignty. They like it when the world relies on them. Jerome Powell and his 6 buddies in his group chat like to be able to control the entire global economic system, and they've built their careers on it. They've built their business on it. And so seeing a change here is a disruption to the world order. But for the first time in a long time, it seems like the good guys are winning. But we've got a super chat here from Music Tags. This is an interesting question. If you were a gambling man, what month do we hit 150K? I'm going to say August.
Oof. I mean, I'm feeling more like
July 8th.
July 8th.
Okay.
Oh, okay. I'm more looking at the end of the year and then an extension into 2026. So I'm going to say December.
December.
Yeah, because I think, we're just going to slowly grind up. I expect a lot of selling, around 130. But, in general, I'm looking for a peak of the market in April of 2026. 150,000 gets us almost to my point. I'm looking for 150 to 200K for the peak at the end of Q1 2026. Just from the extension of the dominance we've seen, the continuous, because we have these. It's not that the 4-year cycle is dead. It's just been morphed very, very heavily. In which I highlighted in the night video that's coming out tonight, because I know everyone's out there speculating, what altcoin can I get that can outpace Satoshis for a few months and then roll it back into Bitcoin. You have to be very specific about what coins you're going to be buying in this current environment. We have 36 million projects out there. Only a few of them are going to really prosper. You know what I mean? So I was very concise about the video. Make sure you don't miss that video that's coming out tonight. We were talking about banks and countries always having to inject liquidity. China central bank governor said Wednesday that the bank is going to cut the amount of cash that banks must hold as reserves by 50 basis points, 0.5%. The first reduction in 2025 as policymakers seek to boost liquidity and prop up the economic growth. Honestly, this is something I've highlighted with Scott Bessent before. is Scott Bessent is a currency general. He is very, very experienced at putting his finger on the scales of any country that has an economic weakness. The economic weakness that primarily exists in China is the overextension of their notes and representation of the money on hand through ghost city developments and the real estate market. People flee to it to house their cash or their Chinese yuan in real estate to protect it from further devaluation by the government. But even that sector has fallen off of a cliff in a very, very painful and violent fashion since Evergrande went under. I don't think a lot of people understood how big Evergrande was systemically to China's People's Bank of China. And now they're having to inject this liquidity. People's Bank of China's governor told a news briefing that the reserve requirement to the RRR will release around 1 trillion yuan or $138 billion in American in liquidity. They're having to pad the bags. And really, the trade war conversation with Bessent, I think, holds a lot of weight because, in my humble opinion, I think Xi Jinping knows that Scott Bessent could put his finger on that scale of their real estate market and make things much worse than they already are.
Yeah, I mean, we do have a lot more economic tools that we, that in our war chest that we haven't even started messing with. I mean, even Lutnick said Treasury's got a lot of options. China's already digging into their options, and again, they're reducing the amount that it needs to be held. They're cutting rates down near zero already. They're already near zero. We haven't cut. And remember what I've been saying this whole time, this whole trade war: he who cuts last wins when it comes to the central banking war. And we haven't cut at all, and that's part of why Powell is holding strong. It's not. A lot of what's going on with all that is theatrics. A lot of us, I believe, think we're going to be seeing a rate cut in June. I don't think he's going to come out and cut anything today. Potentially the end of quantitative tightening. But all the, most of the other central banks have already been in a cutting, have already been in the easing environment, and they're doing that to survive, to stay alive. We're going to do that too. To Drew's point he was just making earlier, we're going to have to do that to stay alive, to stay competitive, to keep the liquidity fresh. But I am curious on that other question. Let us know in the chat when do you guys think Bitcoin's going to hit 150K? I mean, we got what I said August, Kelly said July, Drew said December. I think Drew, that's a long time, but
I know.
And you know what? He's in Josh's chair today, so it makes sense.
That is appropriate.
Okay.
Yeah, he's playing the bear.
He's got the
role,
LA looks hair gel in, and he's sitting in Josh's chair. Dude,
I had to get, Manawak came in with biscuit belly. I had to work out to deserve the food.
Well, there was a lot of chatter about your hairstyle today. They want to see the party in the back. We want to see the back.
Oh,
Turn
yeah.
sideways. Yeah.
Oh, I got
baby. He's rocking the mullet back there.
I was thinking the IROC Z, but it doesn't fit the kids in there. But T-tops will be a part of my future.
Speaking of easing starting to happen, we had this news come in. I just posted it this morning. This has been happening the last 2 days. The Fed just bought approximately 35 billion in Treasury bonds. Now, I said QE has begun. You're going to get a lot of technical hair splitters in the comments saying, it's not actually QE. They're, because it's not full on QE. It's just less QT. They're just rolling over certain things so that way it doesn't fall off their balance sheet too fast, blah, blah, blah. Bottom line is they're buying Treasury bonds.
Right.
That's easing to me. Now, you can split hairs on definitions. You can split hairs on exactly, it's like saying, I can't think of a good example, but it's very, it's like the way they change definitions on recessions. That's what I was going to say. Like it is what it is. They're buying treasuries. That's a sign. They could call it stealth QE. You could call it lessening of QT, but it's bullish. It means the Fed's balance sheet, they were adding treasuries to their balance sheet. And I think we're going to continue to see this. There's stimulus that could happen here. Treasury could also do treasury buybacks. I think that's what Howard Lutnick was referring to. Like they could buy their own treasuries, and that would stimulate the economy. So there's a lot of things they can do to stimulate the liquidity. But to see this has happened the last 2 days. They bought 20 billion on one day and about 15 billion on another day. We've also seen insane amounts of inflows coming into ETFs and just major buying happening. So I've been saying this the whole time. I think summer's going to be very bullish. I don't think this is a sell in May, walk away kind of environment. This is a buy in May. Yeah, stack in May. It'll be okay.
Don't need to pray. But the other thing too is it's not just Bitcoin. Remember, Bitcoin is a part of the global finance just matrix, right? And so what we're also seeing on this chart here from bar chart, US companies buying back stock at record pace. So remember what we saw in the stock market, obviously, and Bitcoin in 2020. We had that global catastrophe, right? And then look at these massive buybacks we saw back here. This is the highest level ever. Highest level ever of buybacks. It's almost like they're looking forward to bullishness to come, and it's not just U.S. companies stacking into this. We also, actually, I'll come to that next. This is the S&P 500 as it relates or compares to the Bitcoin price, and this massive sell-off here with the relatively smaller sell-off here on Bitcoin holding up beautifully strong. If this does have this small little pullback like we're seeing and resolves back to the upside, this can set up to be a massive inverse head and shoulders and slingshot higher. In fact, Wells Fargo also suggested that we're going to see the S&P 500 back over 7,000 for the top. So there's a lot of different analysts that are seeing bullishness here. And then we talk about ETFs or just even institutions. We mentioned MicroStrategy. Look at this chart, everybody. Yeah. This is the number of institutions that have stacked into Bitcoin. Now, look at this back here. What is this date? It looks like October 1st, right? No, we got to get out there and see the world, folks. A lot of people around the world. This is actually January 10th. They do their dates backwards here. Mm-hmm. January 10th. This is the day before the ETF went live, which was on January 11th. Back there, I think the lowest number reading on here is 175 institutions. That's it. Now, over the course of this last year and a half, we have basically nearly 1,800 institutions that have stacked in now. And this is only going to increase from here. This is only going to be rising in ways that we cannot even imagine, which is only creating more and more buy pressure. The question is going to be in the very near future when sovereign bodies, states as well as nation states are stacking into Bitcoin, what's going to happen with the limited supply that's out there? The number one thing that is so exciting about Bitcoin is this idea of supply versus demand. Mm-hmm. That drives the value of every asset price that's out there. And the large majority of people have still failed to recognize that Bitcoin is outside the context of every other asset they've held because they've never had an opportunity to hold an asset that has a total capped supply max amount of 21 million, which sounds like a lot, but hey, there's like 55 or 60 million millionaires in the world, not to mention the number of corporations, institutions, states, countries. I mean, guys, this is the asset of the future and we can participate now. That's what I'm talking about.
There's a lot of scary news even on the macroeconomic side that honestly, a while ago, a cycle ago, I would have expected a big crash. We have the India-Pakistan conflict that broke out overnight. Very tangible kind of conflict building up between those nations. But then also at the same time, China came out and confirmed plans to begin trade negotiations with the United States. This is from our main Discover Crypto Twitter account. Make sure you're following it at Discover Crypto _. But this was the candle that we saw immediately after that. And there's some very, very interesting things coming up this week. Secretary of Treasury Scott Bessent said that they are planning to meet with China's lead economic official for further discussions about this. But as this is all going on, there's a huge conflict breaking out. Very, very unfortunate, really, to see it. And again, as Kelly said, hearts go out to everyone out there. It's basically in response to an assault that happened in India, which claimed the lives of 25 Indians and one Nepali national. And Indian armed forces initiated Operation Sindoor into Pakistan. Now, there is some very, very interesting nuance, and I was talking with my buddy BJ, and he had brought up something that I had kind of overlooked. I knew that it was happening from posts in the past. 2024, we saw this Apple iPhone production, over the next course of the year was being exported. India was expected to account for 12% of iPhone production globally by the fiscal year of 2024. Now we fast forward to what's happening currently. They will call this the first iPhone war. China is attacking India via its proxy Pakistan. Why? Because all iPhones will be made going forward in in India rather. China will not allow this. This is how trade wars lead to real wars, and they are all nuclear powers. And besides all of this chaos going on, Bitcoin is still trying to break back up above $100,000. This should show you the insane strength and the resolve that has come to Bitcoin investors. Not only us here in the crypto ethos realm that have seen it for a few cycles or are in it for our control, where we can put the Bitcoin on a cold storage device like Arculus, use code base 10 or discover 20, right?
How about
EC20.
Why don't I just do this?
We just wanted to take a quick second to shout out our sponsor, Arculus. They are a cold storage hardware wallet, helps you secure all of your digital assets for the future. Just tap this thing to the back of your phone and boom, you're in. We wouldn't be able to do this without them, but also wouldn't be able to do this without you guys, the Disco fam. You've supported us a lot over the years. If you want to support the channel now, just use the code DC20. It gets you 20% off this card. It's the #1 way you can support this channel going forward. Thank you for your support. We'll see you at the top.
Boom. That's the ultimate power right there. Just hold your own crypto. We would have not have made it this far if we couldn't self-custody this stuff. Bitcoin and the act of being your own bank is how we've made it this far. And now the resolve is that much stronger, even in the light of all this chaos.
Yeah. And speaking of that, I mean, to your point, Bitcoin and I saw another post, I didn't pull it up, but for visual reference, but you have to remember Bitcoin does well in almost all environments. It does well in instability with unknowns. It does well when there's printing. It does well when there's tension. It does well when there's no trust. It does well when there's a lot of trust. And so that's what's great when you're in the best asset. You can literally just sit back and watch all this stuff play out. But I do agree, all of these, everything that's happening right now on a macro scale, which is why we spend so much time talking about this stuff, is linked, is intertwined. The fact, if you can kind of see the players involved when you get, it's us, it's China, India is a very key trade partner. And then you've got, they're talking about Tim Cook a lot and Apple. You've got the NVIDIA and SoftBank and these AI players involved. It's like microchip manufacturing. And then you mentioned at the top of the show, these rare earth mineral deals that are happening like that. Everything in Ukraine is about getting their resources.
Right.
And, all these different things that are in play right now. It's pretty fascinating to watch it all play out. But to your point, Bitcoin is the benefit of all of this.
Yeah.
Well, this chart from Tech Dev, always great charts here. It just spells out the picture and visually beautifully. It's essentially Bitcoin's playing the epically profitable game of follow the leader. Unfortunately, this is true for me. This is true for you. All of us succumb a lot of times to our emotions and not the data. I really do believe Bitcoin's going to be higher, faster, stronger. And that's because when you zoom in on this, you can see this massive uptick, right? You can see this massive uptick right in here. This is that global liquidity. And this inflection point is that it's much like we saw when we're looking at that Colin Talks crypto, the M2 money supply adjusted over. This is that lead that we're talking about. And this is going to play catch up, just like we saw back here in 2020, 2021, this large uptick before we had that parabolic uptrend. Same thing we saw back in here. In fact, you can even see these diagonal lines showing that lead that's taken place. I think it's so interesting to see that there's an asset out there that's gained such a world stage, and it makes sense. I've been in these markets for about 10 years now, and I knew that we would get here. It's just surprising to look back and realize how fast it's come, and realizing at the same time how fast this has all happened, and things are only going exponential at this point. So I do think it's time to strap in, because this rocket ship's already getting lit.
Yeah. And, now we're basically to the point I want to start talking about the ETH upgrade, but just as a highlight, I mean, beyond this, Shanghai Gold Exchange International is establishing Saudi vaults for gold custody and deliverables back to the RMB. The dollar's reign is crumbling. I really I don't like this take. I don't really think the dollar's reign is crumbling, but what I do see is a massive amount of gold being hoarded by China. I think that they're kind of choosing that gold play ahead of the Bitcoin play. America's choosing the Bitcoin play while also holding gold. Who do you think is going to win, right? Is it stacking gold that's really going to be the ultimate move right now, especially at these levels? Or is it Bitcoin at the current levels? Because when we talk about Michael Saylor right behind, did they just pass Apple in terms of cash and Bitcoin holdings?
Treasury.
Yeah, that's absolutely insane. So if Bitcoin doubles from where it's at right now in the next year or two, then MicroStrategy is going to have a larger treasury than everything else except for Berkshire Hathaway. Absolutely insane to think about.
I mean, you can see it's not going to take much for it to jump past some of these other levels. But to your question, which one's going to win? Why not both, right? Gold has been the premier store of value for thousands of years. It has that time on market effect. It has that trust, that reliability. Sure, there's some You call them attack vectors. You can call them negative, bearish points when you start to talk about how much gold is still in the earth, the different technologies of getting it out, how much the gold supply isn't capped, right? There's a lot of gold out there. It's just a matter of getting it out of the ground. They're discovering more of it every day.
Right.
But I think they're both going to win. They're both going to perform. And that's exactly what we're seeing. Gold's performing extremely well. Bitcoin's performing extremely well. And the people that are the powerhouses in the future, that the old adage still applies. He who has the gold makes the rules.
Where's the Fort Knox audit, by the way? Right?
Yeah.
Like, haven't we been waiting on that for a while now?
It's next in line behind the Pentagon audit.
But you know what I also think about with gold? Now, this is, I think gold is a great store of value. It's obviously been around for a long time, but I also think about the development and the exponential evolution we've seen with technology in the last 10 years, especially with AI, machine learning, actual mechanical technology, sonar, all these are, we saw what with the scans, what was under the pyramids. Well, I thought about that and I thought about, wow, well, Bitcoin doesn't have something that's going to make it easier to mine Bitcoin to where there's more Bitcoin, because the way it's all programmed with the Bitcoin coding on all the different miners out there. But with gold, there is a reasonable chance that with these new technologies that you could actually end up having a flood of new supply on the market that is unpredictable.
Yeah, you can print diamonds now in a lab. That's the question there, right? If we can print diamonds, how fast technology is moving forward.
Dude, somebody says Mike Maloney predicted a $10,000 gold this year. That would be nuts.
Yeah. I could say I used to.
I like it though.
I like that prediction, right? I mean, that's a quick collapse of trust in the central banks.
Yes.
Right?
Well, and that's a good point. I said controlled demolition earlier in the show. That's part of what's happening right now. The smartest capital allocators in the world see the writing on the wall. They can see what's happening, but they also have positions in almost everything, and they can't just collapse everything all at once. They don't want the world to be in chaos. They don't want everything to fall apart overnight. Like if you're trying to replace a global financial system, you don't want to do that in 12 months. You may not even want to do it in 10 years. You might want to take 20 to do it, and you want to do it in a controlled way. And I think that's what we've been experiencing. When Kelly was showing that graph of institutions and the amount of institutions that are coming to Bitcoin and how fast that's growing, they're all getting positioned. The Cantor Fitzgeralds, the MicroStrategy, they're all getting, like, if you look, the BlackRock is another perfect example. Like BlackRock, guess what? They own MicroStrategy, or a lot of MicroStrategy. They also own a lot of 21 Capital. They also hold the ETFs. They also are big investors in Coinbase, who's custodying all this stuff. So, and probably Strike too, and Tesla and SpaceX and all the things that are winning the richest asset allocators or capital allocators in the world have positions in all of it. Now, so they have to unwind one position slowly and build up another position over here slowly. And that's, I think, what we've been experiencing is basically since mid to the end of 2021. And that's part of why I think the bull cycle didn't go as high as it could have in 2021, is they've been in an accumulation zone for the last 4 to 5 years. And because somebody said the other day, like when Ray Dalio made his quote, oh, the billionaires are coming. Billionaires aren't coming. The billionaires are here. They've been here and they've been building these positions, and they're just now starting to get to a point where they can start talking about it. Larry Fink was anti-Bitcoin until almost like overnight they're launching a product. He's out there endorsing it. It's on their homepage of their website. Their whole sales team is pushing Bitcoin's the greatest thing ever.
He was pretty prepped for it, right?
Yeah, he was extremely prepped for it.
Right.
And these guys don't make decisions slowly. They spend years of researching stuff. They have quants modeling all of this stuff out, and they were getting fed this stuff, and they don't say anything about it publicly until they're ready to take advantage of it. Okay, the stage is set. All right, now I'm going to get out there. I'm going to do a bunch of press conferences. I'm going to go on Bloomberg. I'm going to go on CNBC. I'm going to go on Fox. I'm going to go on all these different channels and say, actually, I've changed my mind about Bitcoin. Bitcoin might actually be the greatest asset I've ever laid eyes
She
on.
was
And
hiring entire teams for Bitcoin.
But,
Right
you know,
ahead.
and beyond that, I think like on the top of our head, most people think of MicroStrategy, MetaPlanet, Similar Scientific, and GameStop and Tesla, of course, also for their purchase of Bitcoin. But a lot of people are leaving this list out right here. This is the top 25 largest institutional ETF holders of Bitcoin. And these are not small allocations. Look at this, $2.6 billion, Jane Street, $2.6 billion, all the way down. It's all the way above $1 billion, all the way down to number 6, and then still upper 900 millions, all the way down to 300 million. I mean, these are massive allocations across. I mean, I've never heard of Horizon Kinetics Asset Management. Have you heard of them? They have $1.3 billion. It's 16% of their assets under management.
Yeah,
This is going to be the trend.
I've heard of a lot of, I mean, Jane Street, Millennial, Goldman Sachs, Sequoia, Horizon. I have heard of Citadel. Let's see,
Tudor Investments.
Yeah.
Damn.
Paul Tudor Jones. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Now with Buffett out, we're probably going to see Bank of America.
Yeah.
Probably that shift.
Apple.
As well, right?
You know, like it's the train is getting ready to leave the station, guys. I mean, it is what British Hodl says all the time. Get to 1 Bitcoin if you can. Figure out a way to get at, mine fiat, buy Bitcoin. If you have to buy altcoins and use that to get more Bitcoin, that's not a bad strategy either, especially when we're in an easing environment. But I will say that's one major difference that a lot of people don't realize. Bitcoin performs well in almost all environments, or in every environment I've experienced. Risk on, risk off, printing, tightening, easing, all of it. Altcoins only win when we're in a quantitative easing risk on environment.
And, to that note, I actually was speaking with Manawak about this earlier. I'm very bullish on the altcoins I'm holding, but I'm also doing it with a little bit of a risk perspective, because everything that's on the table that we talked about yesterday here on Discover Crypto. By the way, if you're tuned in, we got over about almost 6,600 people tuned in. Hit that like button, subscribe, ding the bell, get active in the live chat. We love doing this content with y'all, whether you're watching on X, on Rumble, here on YouTube. Also, again, shout out to all of our channel partners, Bitcoin IRA, L Bank, Arculus. We do appreciate the partnership. We like to bring on companies as partners that offer real utility and real value to what's going on in the crypto ecosystem. But the fact that there's these bills on the floors of Congress right now, the stablecoin bill, and also is it the market structure bill or market regulation bill? I think based on how those things go could impact what we're seeing in liquidity flow in the altcoin market. And unfortunately, for the small time being, it feels like all of a sudden it got super partisan about voting on these various things within the crypto ecosystem. Maybe some of it's because Trump launched a meme coin, maybe not. It just stands to truth right now. There's some things on the table in the near to midterm that could hamper some liquidity in the alts. But I'm still pretty confident that there's a coiled spring there, that we are going to see some massive upside in a number of the altcoins. I don't think it's going to be throw a dart at the board like we saw in the last altcoin seasons, but a lot of those major players are going to be seeing some massive gains.
You got to be concise about it too, though, right? Like, you got to be careful about not chasing giant green candles. It's great to like understand a project after it's experienced that massive upswing, but this is where like the right time to buy is super important. It's kind of opposite in like crypto land. Like, I mean, it's awesome. We have 6,000 plus people watching right now, but I could see that number going to 20,000 people watching live, let's say 5 months down the road, or whenever Bitcoin's breaching that 130K on up mark, then the real fever pitch is going to be happening. And shout out to everyone that's got the wherewithal and the market intelligence to be watching this market right now and getting educated about crypto, because these are the exciting times for me as a creator to talk about crypto because this is where the opportunity zones land. We've been talking a lot about the ETH to Bitcoin pairing. We've been talking a lot about the pain that ETH's been going through right now. ETH, it's having that Pectra upgrade. And here's just some quick facts about the upgrade. You can now do the EIP 7702, running the contract code directly from your regular wallet. The stake limit is now pumped up to 2,048 ETH from 32. So a major increase in ETH requirements to actually get that stake. Now the blob capacity has doubled, making it cheaper for layer 2s, and gas fees are down 30% from batch processing. And at the time of this post, 87% of the liquidations are shorts. Many, many people out there shorting Ethereum. And I do wonder what that liquidity map looks like right now, because ETH and really altcoins. We saw the bad news yesterday, followed immediately by good news. And honestly, the alts look not too bad. Honestly, this is a bunch of layer 2 action, base plays within it. But on the 24-hour, we see some gains and pumpers. Let's go check out the larger markets here and see what's going on. Stacks in the lead right now in terms of gains with 14% up, 63% up on the month. EOS, how you like that, TJ? Blast in the past right there. 13% on the day there. Not too shabby.
Yeah, IOTA too.
Right, right.
Those
Some OG ones, Litecoin.
IOTA, Zcash. This is the 2018 bull run
Yeah.
right there. All of those are for 2018 bull run, 2017 bull run.
Right.
There was no bull run in
And then
2018.
Flare. Remember Flare? All the XRP drama it went through. But honestly,
Wow.
no, I mean, it's about, you can make a lot of money off projects, and even you can make a lot of money off of bad projects. It's about buying them at low levels. Okay. It's about getting in early, building allocations into it at low levels, and then having a goal about how much Bitcoin you are looking to get out of altcoins. And, when you marry an altcoin, in aggregate, most of them trend down and to the right compared to Bitcoin. So marrying altcoins is not something I'm a fan of at all. But right now, I mean, we are seeing a little bit of risk appetite come back to the markets. Very, very interesting to see. Injective has piqued my interest as well at $9. I remember I got it. I think I actually took a small haircut. I got in at $20 and then got out at 17 when the market really started rolling over right in this zone. And now it's trying to find a floor spot. In aggregate, it's fallen all the way back down to this original channel. A lot of people beat down about it, but when you see things start to unwind, trust your gut. You know what I mean? It did unwind. Now we're seeing a complete reset on price. Honestly, I could get this thing for half off as far as I'm looking at it. Yeah, obviously Bitcoin sitting here at 97, but Ethereum back above $1,800. Something very, very interesting on Ethereum is that the bridged net flows over the last 24 hours, Ethereum has taken a huge, huge lead. There's been a lot of interesting increase to the bridged net flows into Ethereum over the last 24 hours, which is excellent to see. Don't think it's dead by a long shot, but it's close competitor and a very, very strong project out there that's probably set to perform pretty well from especially the price it's at right now is Solana. This is a shout out to Crypto Steve. I see in the chat, he highlighted this for me today at a Lunar Crush, that the social dominance of Solana is 4 times that of XRP. Now, XRP can pick up and really start moving out of nowhere.
How do they measure that though? Right? Like
it's mostly like data aggregated from, social mentions. And the reason why that's really shocking to me is because XRP and the XRP army is so incredibly strong.
Yeah, that's what I don't know if I agree with that. Social dominant, like again, it just depends on if you're basing it on just X posts, maybe.
I think it pulls it from like Telegram, a bunch of different communication sources.
Okay,
you know what I mean. So
interesting. I mean, it's definitely strong. I would say it's had a huge growth forward, and it definitely gets mentioned. Like if you think about mainstream media, it gets mentioned a decent amount. But I feel like it's got a ways to go to catch. Like the XRP brand is extremely well known. Their marketing is extremely well known. It gets talked about on mainstream financial media.
Right.
Probably the most, behind Bitcoin, Ethereum, then it's XRP. Maybe Solana is starting to slide into that 4th spot, in my opinion. But it is interesting. The other one I saw on that flows list that I thought was interesting was Sui. Obviously, Sui's been doing, or Sui, doing extremely well recently. We've been doing some videos on those. If you guys didn't catch those videos, I mean, DZ called that pump perfectly. Shout out to him. I hope him and Kat are having a good time on their honeymoon. We see a lot of you guys asking about him in the chat. He will be back next week.
It was so awesome to see how excited he is during the marriage too.
Oh yeah, they did.
He's glowing, man.
Absolutely. Did great.
Huge congrats.
I did want to come back real quick. I did see this super chat come in that we missed. Any news on the FTX repayments? I looked around. I didn't see. They were supposed to start in February. Then things got delayed. I had heard they were going to be happening in May as well. I have not seen any news about them actually happening. Usually they roll them out over time. And then we've also got this one. I'm 15 making... You're making $13,000 a month at 15. What are you doing? Selling drugs? Like,
it's, you know what? Respect hustle.
Good for you, man.
I was like, that was when Party Poker came out.
Yeah.
Right. And I was able to get a bank account and was able to, play poker tournaments when I was super young. Was able to buy like a gym. Like my parents came downstairs and there was like a fully built gym. I'm like, how the hell did you get all this stuff? I've been playing poker. Okay. No, but shout out to you. Good job. I think that's pretty good for 13 years old. Yeah. Yeah. Party poker, man, we were kings. Anyone that was around during party poker, those are the days right there. So let's go back to the flows. I mean, this is stuff to pay attention to. It's we see base taking a tick up. I mean, base is looking strong as well. Say coming in off the top ropes over the last 24 hours. And this is Artemis, Artemis Terminal. You can check it out for yourself. Just type in Artemis Crypto in Google and you'll find it. Go over to the flows, the total outflows, and then the inflows shown here. But net flows, this is what really, and Ethereum, this was deep red not too long ago. It's made up a lot of ground in a very short amount of time. Sonic has been crushing it, right? And when I look at like Sonic, or Sui or Base, then you can tell that there's a flow of crypto natives that are moving into it. Then you look downhill to the decentralized exchanges within it. Then you can look at the different kind of lending DeFi protocols and find little pocket gems that are in those networks and be very, very early. And these are obviously in my portfolio very high risk plays that, sometimes and over the last few years have turned out to be some of the bigger monetary gainers, even without hyper risk environments going off. Now, these types of plays in a hyper risk adverse, in an open market where we see a lot of speculating on altcoins, that's where you get the ballistic numbers. You know what I mean? So this is a great tool to use, and highly recommend anyone that's out there looking into altcoins just to understand this is a very, very different altcoin season. As Kelly said, cannot just sling a dart at the map and hit a 10, 20x like we did last cycle or the cycle before in altcoins. You have to be very concise about what you're looking at. Make sure that the revenue is strong, the TVL is strong. Another great tool is DeFi Llama, which I utilize all the time. And this is where, I've seen some massive spikes. For one of my favorite projects, Ondo has been absolutely insane with the TVL movements as of late. It is again ticking to the upside. It's kind of hard to see. I'll zoom in a little bit, but this thing is breaking out of this shelf. You compare this to the Ondo price overlayment right here. Let's see if I can pull it up here. But I know that the price in comparison is leaving much room to catch up. And so this is the type of tool that I can use. Like I get asked about ICP a lot because, I did get ICP at $3 and then got out in March of 24 at like 16 or 17. And a lot of people were trying to understand like why and how I did it. There's a couple different things. You use the ICP to Bitcoin ratio, but also DeFi Llama, which, it was showing me, essentially that I had gotten it at a low point in terms of price, but the TVL was also very low. And then I saw the price outpacing the TVL in a very, very heavy way in March of 2024, March and April. So I decided to sell it, and it ended up being the right thing. Now these are exactly paired. ICP looks very, very sleepy from this viewpoint. And data is your friend. Take advantage of data within crypto. You're out there speculating. You may as well know what you're speculating on.
Absolutely. And I just wanted to hit this real quick for some of the newer viewers out there. Slick Noob, I appreciate you asking this question. Sometimes we forget all the vernacular that we use all the time, all the shorthand. So TVL stands for total value locked. Right. And that's going to be the amount of capital locked on the chain. So,
right. And that's very, very, like I use those tools, but also, here's a great example. Because I get asked all the freaking time, like, and my wife, she's the real oracle of profit taking, but I use these metrics to make sure that I'm comfortable with the decision. And here's what happened. So in March and April of last year, even though we hadn't really matured up to the level that we are right now, I saw that my AVAX bag and my ICP bags were outpacing Bitcoin in a very, very heavy manner. This is AVAX to Bitcoin on the weekly. You see over just a few weeks, we spiked up. And in general, I think AVAX is going to be able to move against Bitcoin by about 200% from where it sits right now. It is double the price that it was right here, but its dominance is even lower because Bitcoin's price is higher. These are types of things that, if you are speculating on altcoins and you're making it much more complicated than just buying and holding Bitcoin, which is the simplest and easiest way to take control of your finance and really your generational future. Like the game right now is so simple to just buy and hold Bitcoin. But if you are, a few years, maybe a few cycles into crypto, and you're starting to want to look at the rest of the ecosystems and what's, being used to do lending on, or where the flows of crypto natives that are farming yield are going to, then these metrics are going to be your best friend when it comes to taking profits back into Bitcoin, real estate, or whatever it is that you have a goal to change your life with. Obviously Bitcoin, the long-term sovereignty play, but you also can find some great upside and take advantage. Like, well, one thing I did see on the housing market, TJ, is that applications for housing have started to go up. So we've seen the mortgage just barely come down. But I am hoping to just add to the real estate portfolio this cycle with that.
Yeah, I think rates come down, Fed rates, and as well as like retail mortgage rates start to fall this summer. And I think we're going to see a lot of that. Banks got to make their money. They love these high rates, and they're kind of taking advantage of it while they can. But at some point, it's going to have to start to give. So yeah, I do have one more thing. You were talking about Ondo and our favorite not telling story here on Ondo. Guess who, this is Altcoin Daily Post talking about the U.S. Financial Services Committee to release a discussion on the market structure bill that you were mentioning earlier. I do think this bill will end up passing. But guess who used to be the former head of the U.S. Financial Services Committee? Patrick McHenry, who's also part of the Ondo team now. So it's just another, like, if you look at the players involved, that's not always a slam dunk as to which projects are going to perform well. But the more political things are getting, the more telling, no pun intended, it is to look at who's on there. Like kind of like what we were doing with 21 Capital. Like, hey, I think the U.S. Treasury Secretary's son and former business is probably going to have some inside knowledge as to what's going to happen with Bitcoin.
I think, right?
I think these things are going to get passed. It's a bunch of hoopla. It's a bunch of political theater is what I always like to call it, clown show, circus, whatever you get, whatever phrase you want to use. Bitcoin is doing what it's meant to do. The people that pull the strings are pulling the strings, and the politicians will fall in line. So you got to remember, the politicians they're just trying to get paid. They're not public servants. They're out there for themselves, and they're masquerading as public servants. And Bitcoin's winning across the board. It's winning hard. Gold and Bitcoin, hard asset. Gold, Bitcoin, and real estate. You really can't go wrong with gold, Bitcoin, and real estate.
And those are all physics-based investment.
Yeah. Physics. It's like you said, it's math, it's energy, it's actual mass. It's not paper derivatives on sold and resold securities and repackaged and all this crazy stuff. I mean, it's basically, it was funny you mentioned that. I was looking at there was a what's it called, a meme about Einstein, E equals MC squared, Newton, force time, times acceleration equals mass or whatever. And then the A squared, the Pythagorean, A squared, B squared equals C squared. And then Satoshi's. And I don't even know how you would say that equation, but it's basically the same thing, that like capital energy equation capped by 21 million, and it all flows into it. I mean, it's the same thing. And so if you hold Bitcoin, if you like Bitcoin, if you like gold, you're going to love Bitcoin. And you'll probably own some real estate too. That's the way I look to position my portfolio going forward. We're both still young men, all things considered, mid 30s. We've got plenty of time. That's the number one mistake I see people make in crypto. The top mistake people make is trying to get rich quick, trying to feel like they don't have enough time. They're FOMOing. They're chasing meme coins. They're chasing low cap altcoins. They're trying to turn whatever the capital, whether it's $100, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000, they want to turn that into $1 million in 1 year or in 4 years and 3 years. And it's like, look, if you can, any other investment you've ever done, I really don't understand it. Most of these people, they're smart people. They've got 401ks, or they might, or they've done some investing. They've bought some stocks, and they weren't buying that stock thinking I'm going to sell it next year and be a millionaire.
Right.
They were saying, I'm going to buy this, and by the time I retire, I'm going to have this, I'm going to have that.
It's the greed infection, right?
Yeah,
They get that greed infection, and
100%. And for some reason, because people have gotten rich quick in crypto, or in a much shorter period of time than the traditional stock market, people are chasing that. So if they want to get rich in one cycle, and it's like, guys, basically, if all you did was buy Bitcoin, that's it. Just bought Bitcoin and held it
right
for 3 cycles, you're going to be quote unquote rich. You're going to be probably a multimillionaire. Even if you don't have a lot of excess capital, it doesn't take that. I mean, 3 cycles is only 12 years. That's not
like
that
the
long.
easiest asymmetric bet we've seen in a century.
Yes, in our lifetime, for
right.
sure.
For
sure.
It's just I'm super blessed to be able to do this for my job. I started as a researcher here, and now have our own show, the Blockchain Basement. But super glad for everyone that joined us on the show today. The tools that I showed you, DeFi Llama, Artemis, you can use coin perspective and understand tokenomics. We dive in deep on these subjects in the Blockchain Basement. If you want to understand those tools that I use, go ahead and do so. We work hard for you guys every single day. Absolutely awesome show. Thank you for everyone for joining in here. We got over 6,000 people watching still. Make sure to smash the like on the way out. And really, this FOMC is going to be absolutely insane. So we will be back at about 1:30. We're starting it, right?
Yep. All right, everybody go get your work done. Tell somebody about Bitcoin. And then we're going to be back here at 1:30 watching Jerome Powell play Puppet Master with the market. So it's always fun hanging out with you guys. Leave us a comment. Again, I want to know when you guys think we hit 150K. Leave that in the comments. Smash the like button. Text your mom. Say something nice to your spouse. Today's a great day to spread the love and spread some Bitcoin joy. We'll see you guys in a couple.